Hello and welcome. This is Makayla with Honest Talk Radio. Honest Talk Radio is a space where we will be sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly in real, raw conversations to try and do our part to reduce the amount of shame, guilt, and judgment that many of us women face. Our Wednesday night edition is with author, father, actor, nutritional expert, and all-around great guy, Sanjay Raja. And this week we'll be talking about how to decode our food labels. Do you really know what's in the food that you eat? So welcome, Sanjay.
Hey, how are you doing?
Great, thank you. How are you?
Good. So I know you and I talked about this subject matter about a week ago. I've done some other podcasts, and this one's always a fun one because we don't really know what's in our food because we kind of take it for granted. We know the common items, but there's a lot of code names and verbiage that the food industry uses to disguise flavors and additives where people actually knew where it came from. They may think twice.
Yeah, exactly. I do know that from my own experience when I've even remotely tried to look at the back of the labels, most of the things I can't even pronounce.
Yeah, no, it's true. Usually the good rule of thumb is if you can't pronounce it,
don't eat it. Yeah. That's funny. So what are some tips on how to really understand what's in that?
Well, one of the first things I tell the companies that I speak to is that you want to get foods with the least amount of ingredients as possible. So that's the first step. If you can limit it to 4 or 5 ingredients, you're doing good, and as long as they're not chemical names, you're doing even better.
Awesome.
And the other thing is that what people don't realize is the order in which the items are listed in the ingredient section, that actually tells you the first item listed in the ingredient section is the most amount of product contained within that particular item you're buying. So they don't randomly just order the food, the ingredients. They put them in order of greatest to least.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, so when you read that, what you have to realize is if you're buying, let's say, canned vegetables or canned fruit, if you're seeing like high fructose as the main ingredient and the fruit coming in third or fourth, you should probably stay away from it because you're drinking more sugar, less fruit.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So it's just little simple tips like that can kind of keep people out of trouble. But some of the common questions I get, which are very interesting, are, for example, we see natural flavors on different ingredient labels, right?
Right.
So a lot of times, I took the time to kind of go, okay, what is defined as a natural flavor? Well, it's not a man-made chemical compound by any means. However, we think, for example, a common one would be vanilla natural flavoring. And you think it would come from a vanilla plant, right?
Right.
Well, most of the natural flavoring that they put in there for, like, say, a vanilla natural flavoring, unless it says from a vanilla plant, is coming from the anal glands of beavers, apparently. Because what they found was the anal glands of beavers, the chemical makeup and the taste and the scent is similar to vanilla plant, and it's much cheaper.
Okay, I want to know who in the heck discovered that.
Well, it's so funny. Our Canadian friends to the north actually discovered that. So most of the vanilla extract, that natural vanilla flavoring, comes from Canada because they've got a lot of beavers, so they export Canadian, anal glands of beavers. So there you
go. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, like, another popular item is beer, correct? So beer, a lot of beer, that like that light tan coloring that you see in beer?
Yes.
Right? So there's a compound, if you read beer labels, it's called isinglass. Have you ever seen that?
I have to admit I've never looked that closely.
Yeah, most people don't, especially when they're drinking alcohol, because you don't really look at what's in your alcohol, you just drink alcohol.
Right.
But, there's a compound in beer a lot of beers called isinglass. Isinglass is actually fish bladder. So fish bladder actually provides that I guess that caramel colored beer for a lot of different beer manufacturers. So anytime you see isinglass, you are looking at fish bladder. Pretty much.
You're blowing my mind right now. Wow, I'll never look at beer the same.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. You know, when I just started deep diving into this stuff. You know, when I first started my company in 2012, and I just found it so interesting. I said I should probably know what's in my food. And then the deeper I dove into Pandora's box, the more and more confused I became. So, and you know, for example, another common one would be cheese, right?
Uh-huh.
So cheese, everybody, you know, a lot of people love cheese. I'm not a big cheese fan myself. But the yellow coloring that you see in a lot of cheeses, it comes from a compound called annatto.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen?
I did know that, yes.
Okay, so annatto, there's variable sources of annatto that manufacturers can get it from. And some annatto from overseas is made from crushed up ladybugs. And so it provides this kind of reddish coloring that they put in the cheese, and then that creates that yellow coloring, because, you know, white cheese and red combine to make yellow.
Wow. Okay, so I had heard of annatto, but I didn't know where it came from or what it was. I will say that I don't know why, but recently I was, you know, looking for the white cheddar and not the colored cheese, because I, for one, am a lover of cheese. I don't eat a ton of it, but I do enjoy it. I'm not going to lie.
So sticking with cheese, another popular was, do you buy shredded cheese quite a bit?
I usually buy the blocks of cheese.
Okay, so that's a good thing. That's actually, I prefer you do that. The reason why is that if you look at every single packet of shredded cheese, you'll see cellulose in there. You know what that is?
No, but I do.
Cellulose is sawdust. So what they do is they put amounts of sawdust in the cheese so that the cheese doesn't clump together when it's shredded, so it doesn't like cake. So it'll come out shredded versus being one big giant lump. So when you see cellulose, that's sawdust.
Okay, if the listeners could only see my face right now.
I know. And here's the thing with shredded cheese. It is one of the biggest ripoffs there is. I mean, if you look at shredded cheese and a block of cheese, the price disparity is like $1, $2. So you know what? Suck it up and shred the cheese yourself, honestly.
Yeah, and I actually have a handy dandy attachment that goes on my KitchenAid maker or KitchenAid mixer that does it for me. So you can easily limit your time by
the amount of chemicals that's in your cheese. You know?
Yeah.
So you know, and then you got to think about cheese in itself. You know, you've got now you got the different types of cheese. You can get the cheese made with hormone-free milk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you just have to be careful, because a lot of the ingredients, for example, food manufacturers tinker with, because they're creating a new food market. Okay, so you know, we had organic versus inorganic. We had GMO versus non-GMO. We had fat-free versus sugar-free. And then now with milk, you know, and you know how much of a super fan I am with milk. You know, you've got hormone-free milk versus regular milk. You know, so I mean, it's just really, you're paying more for something that should be untouched and natural, anyways.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things to keep in mind. You know.
That brings me to a question about let's talk for a minute about fat-free versus reduced fat versus, you know, just normal, however it comes.
Yeah.
I know that with, you know, years ago, the reduced fat, no fat, low fat diet was a huge thing that really made people think about, oh, if I'm eating something that says reduced fat, then it's got to be healthy for me.
Yeah.
So
yes.
what, talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, you remember there was a brand called Snackwells. Remember that brand?
Yes, I do.
So their claim to fame was everything was fat-free, right? So what they did, though, was they took the fat out and just basically replaced it with sugar so it tastes good. So you weren't losing weight on Snackwells because you're not getting the fat. You basically were gaining weight because all that sugar they put in there converted back into fat.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's why that brand didn't last long once the whole sugar research came out, which was pretty obvious. Sugar is pretty dangerous too, but now that it's become more prominent, that brand could not survive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But to answer your question specifically, fat-free, you have to look at what kind of fat are you looking at. So when you look at a nutrition label, they list total fat, and then they list unsaturated, polyunsaturated, and saturated fat. So for those people who are not aware, what you want is the least amount or zero of saturated fat. Okay. So saturated fat is bad fat. That's the one that causes atherosclerosis. And you can tell good fat from bad fat because unsaturated fat is liquid at room temperature. Saturated fat is solid at room temperature. Okay. So for example, if you ever went out to Chinese takeout or whatever it is, and then the next morning you look at your leftovers and you see like solidified grease, that's saturated fat right there.
Ugh, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much saturated fat. So basically, you want unsaturated, polyunsaturated fat. Those are good fats. Those are heart healthy fats. You want it in moderation, of course. So when you're reading a food nutrition label, look at the total fat, and then look at the amount of unsaturated fat versus saturated fat. And as long as you have a higher ratio of unsaturated versus saturated, you're in pretty good shape.
All right, good to know. All right, another question. So I know when we were, teaching our kids when they started being able to get their own breakfast in the morning, their own bowl of granola or something like that, we focused on serving size.
Yes.
So does, serving size matter, and what should you be looking at when you're reading your label?
No, that's a great question. So, one of the first things I did was I went to Whole Foods when I was researching my book. And there's a whole section on all these like fancy juices that Whole Foods sells. And I'm not just going to pick on Whole Foods, but any sort of, organic grocery store, even like our local brands here, like Publix is big in Florida. And they've got the overpriced juices. They're the fancy bottles. There's like organic and all that good stuff, right? So have you ever had the Naked brand juices before?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Do you still drink them?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, they were one of the first brands to really market the healthy juices and be like a really premium juice drink, and you paid for it too.
Yeah.
So like one of their juices is called the Green Machine, right?
That is the one that I've the most familiar with.
Yeah, so the Green Machine contains all these green veggies and all this good stuff. And guess what? You look at the bottle, most people never look at the sugar part. And that's the problem. And so if you look at the sugar part, it's about 26 to 27 grams, even actually up to 30, depending on what size you get, of sugar per serving. But when people read that, they think the entire bottle contains that much sugar,
right?
Which is not true, right? So a single serving contains that much sugar, 30 to 27 grams. So you have to look at that and say one serving is about a cup and a half or so, or a little bit less than 8 ounces. So you're consuming about 30 grams of sugar there, but most people drink the entire bottle, so they've consumed the equivalent to about 2.5 Cokes. That's what they do.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But yet we're influenced to think that we're making a healthy choice.
Well, it's because it's packaging and slick marketing. That's what it is. And the fancier the bottle, the higher the price, and the more we trust them. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
So, overseas, for example, this is the problem we have in the States, and that is we have no concept of portion control. Okay? And overseas, when I've traveled the world a couple times over, you go to restaurants, they don't give you so much food that you have to take it home.
Right.
They give you enough to eat, and you're good.
In some countries, it's even considered rude if you take your food home.
Yes, absolutely. That's very true. And here in the States, they give you enough for the meal, maybe 2 more meals after that.
Right.
Because we're a society based on quantity, not quality.
Right.
So, then that's the thing. It's all about price and, getting the most people through the door.
Yeah.
So when you serving size, that's the most important thing. So sticking to sugar, sugar has a lot of names. You've got fructose, which means sugar was extracted from fruit. You got sucrose, which is just another name for sugar. Then you've got caramel coloring. You've got all these different names for sugar, but at the end of the day, sugar is sugar is sugar.
Right.
It doesn't change, you know? And the other most important thing to look at is now the nutrition labels. When I was writing my book in 2016, they were proposing to pass a law about including a separate label about added sugars. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Well, I've seen, a lot of the boxes and cartons have no added sugar.
Exactly. So now there's a separate category, not just sugar, but added sugar. So the food manufacturers basically said, we don't want you to pass this law. People are smart. They've got common sense. Well, that's not true. People cannot, determine exactly how much more extra sugar you put in your food. So it was that rule, thankfully, did not pass where they banned it. So now all our labels have regular sugar and added sugar as a separate one. So that tells you regular sugar is the amount of sugar that's basically within the ingredients to make that product. Added sugar is the amount of sugar they added on top of everything else in order to make it taste good or whatever.
Right. Wow.
So
gosh.
You gotta be really, really, really careful about that, because that added sugar, it should be a huge red flag. If you see a lot of added sugar or just even a minimal amount on top of the normal amount of sugar that they find in that product, walk away, run away, throw it away.
Yeah. So we've got a couple questions from listeners.
Yes.
One of them is, so being practical when you're shopping, let's say you've got, your kids with you and you're on limited time, what are some quick and easy ways that we can look at the back of a label to make our shopping experience more efficient?
No, that's a great question. So it depends on what you're shopping for. But my rule of thumb is this, and this is how I taught my kids and the clients, who I work with. And that is, look at the top four things to look at a nutrition label. Number one, look at the amount of protein. Okay? So if there's a good amount of protein, that's good. But now if it's a food item that doesn't contain a lot of protein, that's okay. But, if you're getting some protein out of like quinoa or something, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Two, look at the carbohydrates. Now, a lot of people are very, very concerned about carbohydrates. They do a no-carb diet. So carbohydrates, if they're not complex, then they're simple, which means they're quickly converted into sugar. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yep.
So then the third thing you got to look at is fiber. And this is the one that people always miss, which is fiber. Fiber is so important. Why is it important? Because what happens is, to calculate the amount of carbs you're actually ingesting in your food, you take the total carbs, subtract the fiber, and that number is the amount of carbs you're actually storing in your body, because the other carbs are being eliminated by the fiber.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And then, of course, last but not least, and one of the most important, if not the most important, is sugar. So any food item I look at that is 5 grams or more of sugar per serving, I don't even pay attention to it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So to recap, the 4 things that you want to look for if you're looking at a label quickly is protein, carbohydrates, fiber, and sugar.
Yep. You got it.
All right. We have another question from a listener, and it's referring to dyes or food coloring. So trying to keep your kids away from the dyes, but how bad is it once in a while, and what are some things we need to know about dyes?
So here's the thing. For example, I don't eat sugar, for example, and it was my kid's birthday last year, and they really wanted a exotic birthday cake that they wanted me to make for them.
Okay.
So I love baking, but I don't eat any of my products, honestly. I just don't do it.
That's some willpower right there.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know how it tastes half the time. And I was looking for food coloring, right? And all the food coloring and the dyes were made from chemical compounds, okay? And I just can't pronounce them. There are about 12 different letters in these chemical compounds. So I wasn't going to take the chance. And then I went across to an organic grocery store, and I found food coloring / dyes that were made from plants. Mm-hmm. And they had 3 ingredients in there. I said, sold. But it was more expensive, of course.
Right.
So the quick and short answer is this. It hasn't been extensively researched as to what the long-term effects of these chemicals and these dyes will do to our bodies and, as children if we consume them. Because the study just hasn't been done.
Yeah.
But if we're just following simple logic, and I would say this, if it's not natural, typically the body, has ways of eliminating toxins for the most part, but the more and more we eat, the more toxins build in our system. Who knows what kind of issues will cause us down the road? And kids are more susceptible to any sort of side effects than we as adults.
Mm-hmm.
So my rule of thumb is, if you can avoid it, do it. But if you can't avoid it, once in a while, probably it's not going to hurt you. But just be mindful that we just don't know how it's going to react to our body.
Yeah. So going back to the moderation in all things.
Absolutely.
Here's another, so going kind of back to, what we were talking about with the shredded cheeses and the naked juice and things like that. Are there any trustworthy brands and labels that are kind of your go-to if you're looking for some of those easier
trustworthy brands and labels? Well, I would tell you this. I try not to, and this is kind of a long-winded answer. I try not to buy prepackaged foods as much as I can.
Yeah.
Okay. Because at the end of the day, you could be as careful as you want to be. You can buy the most healthiest organic boxed meals or whatever it may be. But there has to be some level of preservation in there. That's why that food can stay in there without going completely bad, right?
Right. Yes.
So that being said, in a pinch or in a bind, I will buy something that's boxed, and I look for organic. I look for low sugar to no sugar. And I can't really say with a lot of certainty if I gravitate towards a specific brand, because each brand is different and depends also what's on sale, because you're going to be paying a premium price for stuff.
Yeah.
And so that, you have to make a socioeconomic decision as well. And, I've got 2 kids and both are growing like weeds, and my son can out-eat me. So, it's like feeding a small army right now.
Right.
He eats way more than I do half the time. But the funny thing is, he can tell when and I rarely do this because I'll cook it. I'll just cook everything. If he sees me or sees anybody cooking a prepackaged meal, he gets really upset because I've spoiled him because I cook everything. And he can tell the difference. He's like, this doesn't taste as good as what you can make. And I'm like, okay, well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But he can tell the difference now because I've just trained him that way because we just cook everything.
That's nice that that your effort and the time that you put into cooking it all doesn't go unnoticed.
True. Yeah, I was very appreciative of the fact that he notices that it takes a lot of work to get raw ingredients into a dish, and I'm glad he appreciates it.
Yeah.
But what it comes down to is just educating your kids. The more and more you cook, as much as you can, what will happen is they will get a taste for natural foods. They won't have a taste for packaged foods. And you know what? This is very true. That is, when we wean our kids on microwavable foods, on prepackaged foods, guess what? They develop a taste for that because it's high sodium, high fat, high sugar, and these are all, especially the high sugar part, will create a dependency.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're basically creating a legion of children who are basing their nutrition plan off of flexibility and, just having it ready to go when they want to versus making informed choices.
Yes. And I loved what you said a couple episodes ago about having a plan that really makes a big difference.
Yes. So when you go to the grocery store, if you don't have a plan before you go there, this is where impulse buying comes in. This is where buying unnecessary foods comes in. This is where you'll get into a lot of trouble. And by the time you'll get through the checkout line, you're like, you bought, a lot of extra stuff you didn't need. And you go home and guess what? Half the time, you never even touch it or cook it. It just sits there and goes bad.
Right. Yes. We used to have that problem. And now, one of the things that's awesome is these, you can make your list online and then go pick it up at the grocery store. that is awesome because I find myself putting less in my cart and just the things that I need.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So you had mentioned the word sodium. So is it worth salt? Like what are we thinking? What are we looking for with sodium?
So great question. So let's take a step back because a lot of people are not fully educated on salt. We take it for granted, right?
Right.
So I know you and I had this talk probably a while back, but it's good to refresh with the audience. But so sodium salt, most table salt is basically that white salt they infuse with iodine, right?
Right.
So most people don't know where that white salt gets its color. Are you familiar with the process?
I am not, truthfully.
Okay. So this is interesting. When I was doing my research, what I found is that natural salt comes in different colors. Like you have Himalayan pink salt, you've got black salt, red salt, and there's salt that's gray as well. Okay.
Okay.
But natural salt does not come in like a white form. That's not the natural portion of it. So what happens? Well, normal table salt, what they do is they take whatever salt that they mined or they dug up. Then what they do is they superheat it with bone char from bones of different animals. Okay? And then the calcium, the calcium from the bones leaches into the salt to give its white color.
Oh my gosh.
And then they use it with iodine because you need a little bit of iodine. So what happens is they pretty much burn out all the trace minerals in the natural salt. So salt has no nutritional content at this point whatsoever. It's basically calcium that's been, by process of diffusion from bone char has gotten into the salt, and it's loaded with iodine. So now it has absolutely no nutritional value.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why I always tell my clients it's better to go with the Himalayan pink salt, all the natural salts, Celtic sea salt. The reason why is it's not been tampered with.
Right.
It's got trace minerals in there to have some nutritional content. And moreover, you don't retain water with these natural salts as you do with table salt.
Mm-hmm.
Which is especially important for women.
Yes.
So that's why I like to cook, because I don't use table salt, number one. Number two, I get enough iodine in my diet through eating fish and other things, so I don't need to eat salt all day. And number three, coming back to your question, when you see sodium in your packaging, salt is the most frequently used preservative in any prepackaged food, especially the frozen foods, the microwave foods. That's the only way they can keep it, extend the shelf life. So when you're seeing 500 milligrams, 600 milligrams, 700 milligrams salt, that's a lot of sodium, because it may not sound like much, but think about all the other salt you're consuming throughout the day.
Right. It's in everything, almost.
It's in everything. Absolutely. Unless you're cooking all 3 meals a day, which, you know what, that would be my wish, but, a lot of people just don't have the time. You're consuming a lot of excess salt.
Right. Yeah. So rather than going for, the canned goods, as far as, if you're making something that obviously you don't want to can't always sit and stew your own tomatoes. If you're making a pot of chili or something, would you recommend doing that? Like prepping it beforehand if you know that you've got chili on the menu that week, or is there, frozen counterparts?
Well, what you do is I make my chili at home and I buy unsalted tomatoes. You can buy that now. Yeah, so you can buy I buy the diced tomatoes which have the BPA-free lining, unsalted. And now the reason why you can find that is because it's got the heart healthy symbol on there. So you'll see that now. So buy everything unsalted, and then I add my own salt to taste,
right? And
I know I'm not going to get in trouble now.
Awesome. So one more question from the audience. What do you know about food allergies and growing out of them? Or, the allergies are pretty prevalent around with children these days. So what's your thought process on that?
Yeah, so there's all these different schools of thought. Now, my previous career, I was working with a lot of different doctors and surgeons in a consulting role, and I work with a lot of a lot of allergists. And here's the thing: is food allergies a real thing? Absolutely, I do think it's a real thing. But here's the thing: the reason why, and I firmly believe a lot of the reasons why kids are developing food allergies is a number of reasons. Number one would be, if you're not exposed to a lot of foods when you're younger, and I've traveled the world when I was younger, I've been exposed to every different type of food. Guess what? I've eaten it, I've tried it. I don't have any food allergies because my body has time to absorb it. Okay?
Right.
Number two, you have to look at, if you're eating a diet that's full of chemicals, full of prepackaged foods, full of microwave foods. We don't know how these chemicals that they put in our foods is going to react to our bodies at a young age.
True.
So I had the blessing of parents who basically made all my meals for me. So
do you think that's a big difference with, we were talking about how there's so much that's just ready to eat type of food out there, whereas I think our parents' generation, they didn't have as many things available to them that we have going to the grocery store today.
Yeah, their generation was, you get the ingredients, make the meal. Our generation is now, convenience. That's all it is. And so a lot of food allergies develop because we don't know what chemical compounds we're putting in our body that are, basically preservatives in these prepackaged foods. We have no idea.
What about like the nut allergies though, or that seems pretty, or gluten, those things seem pretty prevalent.
No, here's the thing. Here's my thoughts on gluten, okay? So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was bringing that up next, and that is, can you tell me what gluten is?
Oh gosh. How about you tell me?
All right, I'll tell you. The reason why I ask that question is, if you ask anybody what gluten is, 9 times out of 10 they have no idea what it is. Okay? They just know it's bad for them. Okay? So the interesting thing is this: gluten is a binding protein in breads. All it does is makes bread spongy. That's all it is.
Okay.
Okay? So how did this gluten allergy kind of epidemic, almost I would call it, arise? So, we've been eating, before the whole gluten sensitivity thing came out, guess what? We've been eating gluten for a really, really long time as a society and didn't have any issues, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay? So I have a hard time with a lot of people who say, I've got a gluten sensitivity. Now, did you truly have that sensitivity since childbirth? Since when you were born? Mm-hmm. Now, or was it down the road where you saw gluten-free, you saw a lot of slick marketing, a lot of slick packaging? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Food manufacturers always are trying to create the next big food industry. Okay? So guess what? After organic, non-organic, GMO, non-GMO, they were kind of flatlining. So gluten was a home run for them. I mean, a huge home run for them. So I would tell you this. We as hunter-gatherers back in the day, guess what? We were eating bread. We were doing all these things which had gluten. A lot of things had gluten.
Right.
We doing that up until probably, I don't know, like 7, 8 years ago when the whole gluten craze started. So at the end of the day, do I think gluten sensitivity is a real thing? I'm having a hard time with that one, honestly.
Do you think it's more so the other components that are being put into the food with the gluten?
Exactly. Yeah, and see, that's exactly what I was going to get to, which is perfect. How you said it was perfect, and that is, there's no way to tell if it's actually gluten or all the other chemical compounds they put in there to preserve that food.
Right.
We have no idea. So we just kind of picked something and said, here you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of the point, and I truly do believe that, and that was perfectly said by you.
What about going back to the nut allergies?
So nut allergies are a real thing. I do believe, I see people, when I was working in the medical, I do see people who have nut allergies. That's a very real thing.
Yeah.
People that have like diverticulitis, for example, have a hard time with nuts, right?
Right.
So that's a very real thing. Certain people just can't digest nuts and do have nut sensitivity. So I've seen it. People get into anaphylactic shock, have the EpiPen. So it's a very real thing. So I don't discredit anybody who's got that. I'm very aware of that. So, but gluten in itself, yeah, that one's really hard to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some other, oh, here. So one of the ones that we've talked about organic, we've talked about natural. We're kind of trained to think that if it says natural on it, then it's, or organic, then it's healthy for you. So what are some ways to really determine if it's healthy or if it's just marketing?
Yeah, so great question. So this is how, because of all the research and all the negative press on sugar, so now food manufacturers have decided to say, okay, here's another way we can kind of, skirt by this issue of excess sugar. So what they do is say natural, healthy, organic, and contains natural sugar, right? So you've seen the Pepsi, right? Pepsi cans that say 100% natural sugar, no high fructose corn syrup, right?
Right.
So guess what? The body has no idea of differentiating natural sugar, high fructose corn syrup. Sugar is sugar is sugar. It's going to process it the exact same way. Okay? So when you see organic on the label, still flip it around, take a look at it. If the sugar content is above 5 grams, walk away, run away, throw it away.
Okay. All right.
Okay? Because at the end of the day, they're just trying to get you with the whole organic. So you'll be buying something that's more expensive. You'll still get the sugar. And you could save money on getting the cheaper thing.
Right. Yeah. Very true. Those are all really great food for thought, Sanjay. This has blown my mind. And so do you have any final thoughts for us on this food label topic?
Yeah, one of the most commonly, I guess, abused items in people's refrigerators is condiments, okay? And we basically take condiments for granted because we just kind of put ketchup on here, do this, put mustard on there, put mayonnaise on here. And when you look at condiment food labels, those are the most underutilized food labels. So we just kind of take it for granted. So my advice in kind of closing this conversation out is very simple. And that is, the food manufacturers are liars. They will lie to you constantly. And their job is to sell, not to educate. So don't rely on them to educate you, because so many people say, well, I saw this, I saw that. Their job is not to educate you. Their job is to make you a customer for life. Right. So if that's the case, then there probably isn't a big trust factor between you, the consumer, and the food manufacturer. So always read your food labels. Rule of thumb is, remember, keep it high fiber, high protein, low sugar, low carb if that's what you're going for. But flip the label over and start teaching your kids how to read food labels early on, because those are the choices that will make the most impact for them.
One of the things that keeps resonating with me about this conversation today was the story about your son and how he can tell the difference between whether you've made it from home or if it was a packaged meal. Yep. And again, I think that's one of the things that I loved about your book, is that it brings the whole family together when you're trying to understand food and have a conversation around food, as opposed to, well, you're going to eat this because mom made it and it's in front of you. And I love the whole family concept, and that's something that we strive for and don't always succeed at in our family, but it's definitely one of our goals, is to send our children out into this world having an education on food, and not just, I eat because I'm hungry, but I'm eating as a fuel source instead of just because I have to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like most parents that I've talked to and worked with, they just say, eat it because I told you so. I can't stand that answer. Yeah. That's the worst answer you can give a child. You know what? Take the time. Explain what you're doing, why you're doing it. And guess what? They will become more and more curious. And my daughter cooks for me half the time. She's like, I'm going to make this. I'm like, Dad,
awesome.
I'm happy. So they get educated, they get motivated. It's exciting for them. And you know what? When we are closer to our food source and we know where it comes from, it affects every aspect of our lives. It affects how we see the world, process the world, think, sleep. it only affects us every single way because you have to consume food every day. And people just take that for granted. So the message is clear, and that is take interest in what you're eating, not out of convenience, but out of the long-term goals you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And, nutrition is one of the pillars to success.
Absolutely.
So I will say that I have been greatly motivated through hosting this podcast with you, and I'm just excited to continue that journey of nutrition and health in our household.
No, that's great. And then we'll post, you and I will sit down, we'll post another recipe for everybody listening, and hopefully they'll like that one too.
Fantastic. Sanjay, can you tell everybody where they can find you at on social media?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Facebook at Go Big Raja, and then also on Instagram and Twitter, and then check out our website at teamnoexcusesfitness.com, and then our book website is thefoodtalk.net.
Awesome. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.